Negative numbers. It's a review of Math 011, and you have two signs rule. The two signs rules together result in one sign. Okay, and we have to establish that two sign rule is for multiplication. That must be taken note that when you have two plus signs next to each other, that's a multiplication. A plus times a plus is equal to a plus. A negative times a negative is equal to a plus. So in other words, when the two signs are the same, no matter plus or negative, and they are multiplied or divide, that happens to divide too. The answer is a plus. When the signs are opposite and you are multiplying or dividing, the final answer is a minus. So a negative times a positive is a negative. A positive times a negative is a negative. Call it the two sign rule. Okay, two pluses multiplying, you have a plus. Two negatives multiplying, you have a positive. Plus positive. A plus times a negative is a negative. A negative times a plus is a negative. And the same applies for division. So you can call it the two sign rule. Yes? Now, from a different perspective now, you can look at symbols and words to speak. When you see a symbol, you want to say something in your mind. Yes? And mathematics involves a lot of words to symbols. So if you see a symbol, you have to say a word. Okay? If you see a symbol, you've got to say a word. If you see this symbol, these are the words that you can say. You can say and in arithmetic. You can say plus. You can say a sum of. You can say a total of. You can say positive. You can say have an amount of. You can say continue, proceed. All these you can see when you see this symbol. So it's not just the plus sign. I know we are familiar by just saying the plus sign or the positive sign. These are the two common ones, the plus or the positive. But try to familiarize yourself with these other words that you can see, you can speak when you see this sign. Again, when you see the sign, we say the negative sign, or we say the subtraction sign, we say the minus. So those three are very common. But please, you can also see a difference of, take away. Apart from subtract, minus, a negative, you can say O, an amount of, opposite direction to, do the opposite to. So all that you can see when you see this symbol. And please remember, every mathematical symbol that you see has a real application or real interpretation. So this is why you can see these words when you see this symbol. So it's not just plus and positive for that symbol. You can see all of this. It's not just minus, neither subtract, neither negative. You can also see all of that in arithmetic. For example, every mathematical symbol that you see has a real application or interpretation. Always bear that in mind. Symbols you may see. You may see this symbol, and you may see that symbol. You may see this symbol and that symbol. You can say 5 is equal to, you can also say, if you don't see a sign in front of the number, then just know there's an invisible plus sign. That's what this is saying. If you don't see a sign in front of a number, there's an invisible positive sign. So if you see a number like this, just be by itself, like you will say 5. But you can see and 5 units. You can also say that because there's an invisible plus sign there. Here it is, and 5 units. So you can, not just 5 alone, you can say and 5 units. You can say a plus 5 units because there's an invisible plus. You can see a sum of 5 units, a sum of 5. You can see a total of 5 because that sign can also be called a total of 5. You can say positive 5 units because there's a real life application to that 5 with 5 fingers, positive 5 fingers, positive 5 mangoes. You can say have an amount of 5 units because this sign you can see have an amount. It may sound a little strange at first, but get accustomed to that because you're thinking in terms of the application. Continue 5 units. Proceed in that same direction 5 units. Okay, so it's not just positive 5 or just 5 alone. You can see all of these when you see a number simply by itself like that. Again, just remember, every mathematical symbol that you see has a real application, or interpretation. So for example, you may see this, and you may wonder what to see. Negative 5 units, that's very common. Subtract 5 units, you can see that. A difference of 5, take away 5, or an amount of 5, you can also see that. Opposite direction to 5, do the opposite of 5, minus 5, all that you can see for this simple dash that you see. So it's not just negative 5 alone, you can see, get accustomed of seeing, you know, those different phrases. All right. Another scenario you may see this, and you may wonder what to see. You can see a difference of 8 and a difference of 5 is equal to a difference of 30. The reason why you can see and, even though you are not seeing and, because you can also try to remember that rule. Immediately after a number, you can say the word and. So even though you are not seeing anything there after, apart from that negative sign, you can see and. This is negative 8 and negative 5. Negative 8 and negative 5. Negative 8 and negative 5 is negative 13. You can also say take away 8 and take away 5 is equal to taking away 13. You can say subtract 8 and subtract 5 is equal to subtract 13. Minus 8 and minus 5. So there's an invisible and just after the 8. Okay, there's another and, you know, after the 5. If there's something else, you can say and. Or an amount of 8 and or an amount of 5, you are owing 13. Because apart from that, say negative, you can also say O for that negative sign, that minus sign, that subtraction sign. You can say O is an owing sign. Do the opposite direction to 8 and do the opposite direction to 5. You're doing the opposite direction in 13. Because you can look at this sign in terms of direction, opposite direction to 8. Okay, so please bear that in mind. Here's a scenario that you may see and you may wonder what to see. This is 8. This is a positive 8. There's an invisible positive 8. And there's an invisible and. That negative sign you see there does not belong to the 8. Just after the 8, there's an and to separate them, to separate the positive 8 from that 2 signs there and the 2. Here it is, 8 and negative negative 2. So what can you say? How can you interpret that? Interpret this. Okay. Remember, the negative sign belongs to the number on the right. So that negative, those 2 negative signs does not belong to 8. You have to group it up with the 2. And what do you say? How can you apply that? Instead of saying negative negative, negative negative doesn't really give you any real life application. You can say having 8 and you do not owe 2. Do not owe. Remember, you can say do not and you can say owe for that very same sign. Do not owe. So if you do not owe, then you have. Okay, so that is 8 plus 2, that's 10. Because this is basically saying do not owe. Again, if you remember the 2 sign rule, the 2 negatives side by side multiplying, it becomes positive. So again, you can even apply the 2 sign rule that we started with. Okay, negative times negative is a positive. Or you can say do not owe. You can also say positive 8, because there's an invisible positive 8, and not a negative 2. This is not a negative 2 because this is a negative sign normally oppose. All right. Negative sign is like it opposing what is actually happening. So this sign, this first negative sign is opposing that negative sign. So it's like do not subtract 2. So then if you do not have to subtract 2, then you have to add. Again, you can apply the 2 sign rule. 2 negatives multiplying will give you a positive. You can also say add 8 and do not subtract 2. Add 8, you add in 8 and do not subtract 2. Okay. Add 8, negative times negative 2 will give you a positive. So you can see all of these, all right? And this becomes 8 plus 2 will give you 10. Take note, a negative and a negative is a negative because and in arithmetic is a plus. A negative 8 and a negative 8 is a negative 13. We did that already. Negative 8 and negative 5 is negative 13. So it's a common mistake. Some persons may say a negative and a negative is a positive. No, a negative times a negative. Bear that in mind. times will give you a positive. Always bear that in mind. Take note again, just to reiterate, a negative and a negative is a negative, because and in arithmetic is plus. So if you have a -8 and you have a -5, you have a -13. The -8 and -8 is a -13. And is a plus in arithmetic. So a negative and a negative is a negative. Take note again, a negative times a negative is a positive. That's the 2-sign rule. A negative times a negative is a positive. -8 times -8 is a positive 40. A -8 times -5 is a positive 40. A negative times a negative is a positive. The 2-sign rule. So know the distinction between a negative and a negative is a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive.